What is up, everyone? Pittsburgh White Shorts coming at you with something a little bit different today. I'm joined today by Brian.
Hello, hello.
And today we are going to talk a little bit about Alice. I am prepping to go to Chicago this upcoming weekend, which, by the way, if you're there, definitely come up and say hello. I'll be with Dean and Kit competing. Unfortunately, no one else from Pittsburgh is going to be able to make it out. But going into this event, this is the first event where Alice is legal. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it. It is definitely the hot button topic, right?
Yeah, it is. It's the deck on everyone's minds here going into these next couple Spring Fest events here at the end of this month.
If you have had the luck to, or I guess the unluckiness to have played into it already at your locals, you're either tearing your hair out or you're the one playing it and everybody else is tearing their hair out at you. So let's just talk about it a little bit. Let's talk about Alice herself to start out. So base 10K, it's usually 11K though, because you got two of this brainstorm. After backup, it's going to top out to about 14. That's that 1-1 PR Mito, which probably just showed up at your locals, or if you got it.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
Comes out at level 1, Pachin style, which is with this brainstorm. It's a spammable brainstorm for 3. If you hit and Alice hits the board, you cannot hit on multiple and be summoned. Its salvage and stocks occurred at climax phase, so anti-salvage, if you're thinking of using that new Psychono anti-salvage, that only works in the attack phase and will not save you from Alice plussing. You should expect players to consistently double combo this with a normal game state, and often triple it. I would say tripling happens by 50-60% of the games. I get it quite a bit. It's gated by stock. If they have 3 stock, you can expect double. If they have 4, you can typically expect triple. There's sort of like a way you do that. You go down to like 6 cards before shuffling back with 3, 9 cards with 4, and then they shuffle them back and they go that way. Level 0 is dedicated completely to deck control to maximize the chances of early playing Alice. So you can't really catch them in bad deck states because pretty much all their cards are cards that convert into other cards that continue milling their deck that like go +0 to do their effect. Most commonly being the admin sends itself to clock, grabs an event, the event grabs another admin, the admin sends itself to clock, grabs another event. They can just keep going and going and going. It doesn't expend hand. Does require a full board of anniversary trait. So watch out for that. If you're going to regionals, they can't have any old cards on board. It's anniversary trait only to the combo. The Alice player usually is at low hand after they do their climax combo. That's dependent on how many resources were burned to get them out. So, that's completely dependent on how your opponent's game is going. The mill out turn requires some finesse, but I don't think many people would consider it very difficult. I mean, Brian, you just started playing it. I don't think it's too bad, right?
No, I think I picked up on it after a game or two. It's pretty straightforward once you get a feel for when you need to be shuffling the Alice's back and how small your deck needs to be in order to facilitate that.
So the big thing is, if you are not the Alice player, how do you deal with this deck? If you have sat across from it, you've been unlucky enough to do so with a deck that's not prepared, it's really, really miserable to sit across from this combo. So let's talk about it at level 0. There's a couple things you can do in level 0. There's really not much. If the Alice player does go first, you can try to push them straight to level 1. However, this can only really be done if you're a deck that tri-fields really well on the first turn. Something with on-death pluses, something like Hall Alive, or maybe if you play a clean cut, this is something you could try to do, but you have to also remember that the Leafa hand to stock makes double Alice possible, even when this quote-unquote works. So just be conscious that it's not always a great idea to rush them, because then if you're not prepared, you got to be ready on the next turn. You got to have a follow-up. Zone Bomb, the Fuka Zero, the Chieri for level 1 or higher to deny the mill. If you're already running bombs, I wouldn't put bombs in your deck to do that, but bombs are, pretty decent right now because of Hall Alive. So, if you have them, use them. Definitely kill every single card that they play. Never side against Alice for like trades. Always trade. Get cards off the board. If their early game is going poorly, because their combo needs full board, they can take that like one slot pretty far in terms of like putting out an Alice they otherwise couldn't. So definitely trade when you have the opportunity. Other thing to remember, 1-0 Alice Brainstorm gives negative 1k per copy to a card on your front row. So all these 500 power memory cards that need to get reversed are just going to get popped, and you are never going to get a chance to use them. It is extremely annoying. So like in Psychono, you have like, again, the anti-salvage doesn't work against the salvaging part outside of salvaging off choice trigger, but that card does give 1k to your cards in front. So that's something that you can do if you're playing Psychono. Unfortunately, Slime, you don't really have an answer. You just throw it out and just kind of expect to get nuked if your opponent goes to level 1. So just something to keep in mind. There's not really much you can do here at 0, but just be very aware. You know, if you shove your opponent to level 1, even with the first thing, if, you know, they just didn't cancel at all and they're just not ready, they'll just take a gap turn and like cancel 1, stay at 1, and then do their combo at like 1-5, 1-6. It doesn't really matter to them because Alice is so big. There's not much that can really contest it. So they'll happily take a gap turn there to get to their resource threshold. So just something to keep in mind. Moving on to level 2 killers. I want to talk about this because I think the main thing people see is like, oh, Alice is a 2-1. Let's just throw like 2 level 2 killers in our deck and just call that our answer to Alice. And I think this is like the complete wrong way to think about it. And any answer you put in your deck that's power based that doesn't hard remove the card is basically the same. You can think of them like a level 2 killer, like I'm like swinging over it with 2/2 Nino, stuff like that. Any power based strategy to get over Alice, if you're not like kicking the card to another zone, could be considered what we're going to talk about here. Another thing is like these have to be 12k base against level 2s to even matter. If they're the smaller ones, like I know they have some other ones that have other effects that go to 10-5, don't even bother. It's not going to matter. Doesn't even force counter. Like if they're only 10, they go to 11 with climax. All that does is tie. Really want to hit that like 13-5, 14k with climax down, like these good ones like the Shirogane and the Eriri here, which are 12-5 on their own, 13-5 with climax. Then you have any other buff, they get even bigger. That's really what you want. But even then, let's get into it here. So if you're gonna have a power-based strategy to clear Alice, you have to kill every single one they put down. Because if an Alice player knows that you like have a level 2 killer, like a single level 2 killer, or a single way to just get the card off the board, they're just going to pick up another 2-1 Alice and then put it back down again. And it's easier for them and more incentive for them to replay Alice's in combo again than it is for you to put down a card that, like, you know, you're not doing a level 1 combo in a lane, you put down a level 2 killer, right? You're doing effectively something against your strategy to try to hurt your opponent, but it doesn't hurt your opponent much you should.
Yeah, you're overextending too hard.
And but we have seen, I think people say like, oh well, like I ran the level 2 killers and I really got my opponent with it and they couldn't do anything. And I think that only happens when you catch your opponent flat-footed. I think when your opponent does not know that you have a card that can answer Alice and they pick up stuff like counters and they sort of don't play intelligently or don't play with the knowledge of what you have, rather, that you have an answer, then the level 2 killers really do work. But if your opponent's in the know and you're not going to catch them with it, you're not going to get them or catch them with that knowledge gap, your little tech isn't really going to do much. Because again, it means you're not going with your strategy. The exceptions to this are like if you're playing that level 0 Kaguya deck with the level 0 back row combo that just slams 4 Shirogane because he's an attacker that happens to be red at level 1. Like you're playing 4 level 2 killers, you can slam down 1 in every lane very reasonably. Or like after Chainsaw Man comes out, you're just playing Power, a card that happens to just swing at 13-5 against level 2s for free. If you aren't doing something like that, like the little level 2 killer tech doesn't really mean anything. However, that doesn't mean you can't play the cards. I think when you actually have the space to put them in, a really good example is like I think AOT, pretty much all builds of Attack on Titan are playing 2 of that 1-0 Connie Slayer, the one that swings at 7,500 and gives anti-encore to sort of like fight Quints with their 2-2. You could literally just put 2 of the 1-0 Historia level 2 killer that we saw in the previous slide. You can just put it right in that slot because AOT in the matchups, it doesn't need that card. that card's just an auxiliary attacker, and that's all they're looking for. When your deck has the space to do so, you can toss those cards in, but it's really better to prioritize your strategy and just try to play the cleanest game you can than try to warp your deck around an answer that's not good enough. Weiss is still Weiss. There's a whole game to play past level 1. Your Adachis, you know, you have those really good ones. You have a Memory Adachi. That'd be awesome. Bottom deck and Memory are the best zones to send Alice. They're the hardest for them to get them back. And then, of course, like early plays and stuff are good ways to sort of like claw your way back into the game. So don't get like too hung up on the level 2 killers. If you have the space, you can run them. Just know that, like, you know, you gotta do you before like you're trying to hurt the Alice player, because the Alice player can just put down more Alices a lot easier and then combo off them. Your level 2 killer isn't your combo, unless of course your power. So moving on here beyond level 1. So we're already in like a board focus meta, right? I think a lot of decks are already including like tools to fight back against board in the mid game, like from level 2 against decks like Hololive and Quince. So like you probably already have like some decent board based tools. Remember, if you can get an Alice off the board, the other ones are going to shrink, right? Because they're 1k per each other.
Yep.
It can help you hit over. Again, a lot of cards playing those, a lot of decks playing those cards already. You still have your early plays, and like, yeah, you can say, yeah, but Alice has easy access to anti-change counter. You know what else has access to anti-change counter? Hololive. Like
most decks, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, so just continue as normal. Like we've been playing early plays. Yes, anti-change counter is a thing, but it's not like early plays just don't work. Like, you know, you can still use them. So then that just means that hexproof and anti-backup early plays, stuff like Armin or President, those are back at a premium now. Like cards like that rotate in and out of the meta, whether or not they're useful. Card like a President right now, pretty good. And then if you can take back the board at 2, there are opportunities for you to counter your opponent at their top end, depending on what they play. Silica notably requires a full board. That forces your Alice opponent to find Graham, which is an event. And yes, they have top checks, and yes, they have time to grip it, but that's yet another card that they have to find and play. Every combo is pretty susceptible to tap. Alice doesn't really have slots for bouncers. So if you're playing Hololive, that's something to keep in mind. Or Mushoku Tensei, something else has tap counter. Because we don't have the LN set, the only real top end that heals that's popular right now is Kirito, and that is less popular than Silica or Argo. Kirito also has a lot more moving parts. He's harder to set up. And, you know, is like that Yu-Gi-Oh gets like destroyed by a zone bomb, right? It needs to get reversed to go to memory, things like that. So a lot of lists only use the Asuna early play as their healer. So they're not going to be able to like heal spam as much. They're going to like heal once a turn, like kind of at 2. They're not going to be able to like heal spam down. So that's also something to keep in mind. So here is like a sample Alice deck list. Gonna like briefly go over what the cards do, because again, this is more about playing into Alice, right? We're worried about what the cards can do, how we can deal with them. First one here, that's going to be an on-play Rize for events. They're going to check 3. They can add the 1/0 event to their hand or add money counter or something like that. Pick that up, swings in at 4k, so they have a way to clear 4k up to 4k lanes at level 0. Something to keep in mind if you're like playing like an oversize or something like that. They can beat over it if they're going second. That needs another card on board to hit that 4k. Leaf is a filter card. That card makes their deck run. The hand to stock lets them do things that no other deck should ever be able to do. It lets them extend, like sort of, especially in the early game. We talked about that. You rush them when they only have 1 stock. Well, they could pretty easily have 2 stock. And then put out some Alices, so that's something you got to play around. Fuka 0, level 1 or higher. They could play an event, give something a soul. That doesn't come up very often, especially because this card rarely swings, even if they play it down at level 1. But that's something you could, you know, at the end game might come up. Way to pump a character a soul. The admin makes it really hard for you to level lock them. This card also just lets them exchange a card in their level, so like you can never really like get color screwed playing Alice. But yeah, this card is like easily loopable. You can't really lock them out when they play this because it just sends itself to clock as cost to mill. The Argo Brainstorm lets them play events without color if they ever needed to, if they somehow whiffed green for the money counters, if that's on board. Also gives 1k on climax play. It's a way that they can sort of like randomly shove over with climax downs, to keep that in mind for your power thresholds. Sortalina, if you are unfortunately playing a memory deck, specifically New Psychono or maybe Slime, this card is a absolute nightmare for you. That matchup is already very difficult for you, and every time your opponent plays down this card, you dump memory if you're over 5. And then you only keep 4. You do get to choose the 4 that you keep, so if you're Slime, you get your masks back, which, arguably might be good for you. But as Psychono, this is like an absolute nightmare because you just lose your compression unless you keep your memory over deck. So something to keep in mind playing against Alice. The memory strategy, making memory and crashing out is just not going to work because you have to get over deck with your memory for it to matter.
Yeah, those memory dump effects are at their most relevant when they're stapled to a card that the deck already wants to be playing. And Sortalina's second effect is definitely a card that this deck wants to be playing.
Yeah, it's pay 1, sack itself, shuffle back any 2 characters. It's like a 5th 1/0 Alice to help you, get yourself out of bad situations. When bad things happen, you got to fix. Sortalina's like your sledgehammer. She lets you get yourself out of situations and that you would otherwise not be able to Alice in, and then you just randomly triple Alice because of Sortalina. Card's really strong, and it's a level 0, so you can always grab it and then turn a stock into another card off the Rico. So you don't even have to hit a higher level character to get what you want. Then just climax swap, and this is a hand to clock check X, where X is the number of your opponent's characters. This Aggle here to dig for climax so they don't whiff combo. Like we said, 1/0 Alice negs 1k for each time they shuffle back to your front row. You have 1k or lower cards, they are getting popped, and your opponent is swinging direct. And after their shuffle back turn, they're usually swinging with a soul trigger. You are getting cracked for 4/4/3 if you have open lanes, usually against an Alice board, because they are shuffling back soul triggers even if they don't hit on their Pachin. So that's something to keep in mind. 1/0 event, milling 4. It is a tornado style. You must mill 4, and then it salvages X or lower, where X is the number of soul triggers you hit. So salvages that level character or lower. 1/1 mem kick. Pretty important to know that they have a mem kick at level 1, as well as a 3k counter that sends itself to bottom deck as additional cost to give you that little bit of extra power to make it 3. So that's up to 14k, and they have a memory kick effect. If you have a full board effect at level 1, such as 2/1 Meliodas, that is a combo you can never resolve against Alice, because when they have Alice on the board, you have to remember their whole deck was upside down. If they did not trigger that 1/1 event and they did not salvage it, that means they already have it. That's something to keep in mind when playing against Alice. Their entire deck is in their grave. They've dredged their entire deck, and they probably don't have any stock. So if they don't trigger it off their attacks and they didn't salvage it, that means it was already in their hand. So just that's another thing to keep in mind. Obviously, we talked about Alice. 2/1 Dicey Gilbert counter. I don't even know what this card costs now. It's cringe. But
$25 or something ridiculous. Yeah,
it's a bottom deck anti-change counter. Pretty good. But they have it. It's an anti-change counter. Money counter, depending on what build of Alice you're playing into, you might see this card, you might not. I feel like 2/1 Graham is a little bit more popular right now, especially because of people thinking about the mirror. If you play down Graham, all your Alices win, which is definitely relevant. But here we're playing Argo. This is just a sample list, so we're just playing the money counters to have it. Usually 2 is never more than a 2/2 of both events, but you'll see it in some amount in pretty much all lists. If they're playing Silica, they're probably definitely playing at least 1, and they're probably playing multiple Graham. I see people leaning towards Graham more than money counter, which I don't know. It depends. Money counter is extremely good right now against 7 Deadly Sins, so I guess it really depends how much you want to tech against and or hate playing against 7 Deadly Sins. So something to keep in mind there. Their finisher of choice, Argo's the big beat stick. It's a burn for 3, swing for 3, and then Musashi behind both of those instances of damage. So whichever one gets canceled, you Musashi. Again, you thin a lot of level 0s out of your deck, so the Musashi usually hits for 2 or higher, because you're really getting those level 0s out with the Alice combo throughout the game. Something to keep in mind there. Asuna healer. They cancel on this card's lane. It can pop back to hand. Don't go for reverses against this card. at the end game because they could just pop it back to hand and deny you for free. Pretty much all versions of Alice will run a stock swap, whether it is this 3-2 Alice here or the red Liz from the new set. They both effectively do the same thing. This Alice herself is big, and then the Liz has a secondary effect to give 4K. That doesn't really matter unless they're trying to break board. It does give 4K to the whole board. And then there'll be 8 choice. There's choice door. There's choice pants. I've even seen people play choice bar. But the important thing to remember is like their counter split. You can usually expect on the worst case 1-1-1 mem kick, 1-1-1 3K, 1-2-1 anti-change counter, and then 2 money. That's like your worst case for counts. And then of course check your opponent's grave, check for counters, things like that. Their whole deck's upside down, and you know what they pick up, so you're gonna have a pretty good idea of like even the tech card counts your opponent runs. So definitely ask for grave. It's definitely going to be one of those matchups. And lastly, all this said, we've given you some tips to deal with Alice, and you might be thinking, well, that's not that many tips at all. And I mean, that's just because Alice is still a monster of a deck, and you could probably expect it to get banned. What I've seen on Twitter from Japanese players is what they are most likely expecting is a 3-choose-1 between these 3 cards: the 1-0 Alice, the 1-0 Event, and the level 0 Lifa. The level 0 Lifa is so powerful, it basically puts the other 2 cards in the ban list, which means that you can't really play Alice anymore. Or you could try to play Alice without the Lifa. You could try to play just the silica filter, which kind of does the same thing, but then you lose the Event. So it's a little bit rough, especially over here when we don't have the LN set, which has more milk cards. But I think the number one tip, and I think Brian will agree with me here, play a modern deck that has come out within the past year and a half or so at maximum. Alice really bullies and eats these older or maybe more undertuned sets alive. If you don't have things like 1-1 Adachi or like an early play that can swing for like kind of big and at least heal you, it's gonna feel so much more miserable than it already will.
I mean, if you're playing a deck that has no anti-change options against Alice at level 1 and like a suboptimal early play like Carmen just said, that's you're just dead in the water against Alice. There's literally nothing you can do against their board full of 12Ks or 11Ks.
And the deck is pretty cheap, Brian. I know you bought it outright reasonably. How much did you pay, if you don't mind?
I couldn't tell you. I picked up a playset. So...
Oh, you picked up a playset. Okay.
Yeah.
But the playset couldn't have been too bad, right? And that was for everything.
No, it was like 180, and it's even less than that now. This set is so this deck is in such high demand that the playsets are flying out of people's hands right now, in demand for the Springfest season. So if you're looking to get this set, it's relatively cheap aside from the old stuff like money and the Gilbert Interchange are not super cheap again because this deck is as strong as it is and everything is in super high demand right now.
Yeah, when you only have like 1 or 2 cards like the Alice and the Money and the Graham that are the only old cards in the deck, those cards spiking makes sense because the rest of the deck's probably between $80 to $110, $120, I would imagine.
Yeah,
it doesn't run too many double rares here.
Yeah, when I gauged it on release, it couldn't have been more than 60. It's probably up a little bit now, though.
But yeah, that is about it for today. Bit of a quick one. We're preparing for not only New Jersey later, but I am preparing for Chicago. If you want to give Alice a try, there's always Weiss Fight. It is not on the automatic simulator yet, but I'm sure somebody is working on it, so you can look forward for that in the future. But it's on Weiss Fight. Everything's always immediately on Weiss Fight. Card games competitive, we don't own and operate those, but we are in there. You want to talk about Alice, maybe come up with some of your own other answers to it, or maybe something spicy or something like that. You can catch your opponent off guard and get that stuff to work. That's definitely the place to talk about it. And if you're looking to pick up a playset, like you said, there's always people selling on the global and NA communities if you're looking for cards, so definitely give that a look. Any closing thoughts, Brian, about Alice before we get out of here?
Other than going into these next couple Springfests here, if you're planning on attending, expect to see an Alice on probably literally every team that is gunning to win the event.
It's got everything going for it. Sword Art's super popular. The deck is cheap. The deck is strong.
Yeah, it's like back when Mushoku came out. Expect to see it all over the place.
Sounds about right. All right, with that, Pittsburgh White Shorts signing off. We'll see you all in the next one.